everyone, Aimer back with another Mission Impossible episode review. This time I am reviewing as we near the end of the original series, Season 7, Episode 20, which is called The Pendulum. So this one starts with an army officer driving a car with a guy named General Weston in the back seat. The car stops at a construction site and a man named Gunnar Malmstrom shoots the general, and the officer, who is actually his man Bach, helps Malmstrom bury the body. The two come to a meeting where Malmstrom tells him that he was successful, addressing one of the men as leader, and we see that there is a double of General Weston among them. The leader, or I should just say leader, says that now Operation Nightfall, their plan to take over the U.S. military, can begin. Jim finds instructions in an empty tavern. The mission: Malmstrom's group is called the Pendulum, and the only thing that is known about them is that they are planning something called Nightfall, which the IMF must learn about and thwart. The apartment scene shows us the usual stuff. We learn that Casey has been going out with Gunnar, who has a large electronics company as his day job of sorts. That night at dinner, Casey, who's calling herself Andrea, tells him that she works for a man named Elton Howards, who's on the lookout for talented go-getters, and Gunnar has passed the initial test. Willie comes to the table and says that Andrea has overstepped her bounds in her dealings with Gunnar and orders her away while Gunnar remains quite confused. The next day, Bach comes to Gunnar's office saying that Elton Howards has come to see him, providing a fancy-looking ring in an envelope. Howards turns out to be Barney, who says he wants to be put in touch with Pendulum, places a bug in the room and gives him his contact information. Gunnar gets Bach to follow Barney to his hotel, where the IMF allow him to overhear Barney as Howards talking to Willie about something called Project Mosque, and that Gunnar will be a good fit for their future plans. Gunnar looks into Elton Howards, but finds nothing specific other than he seems quite wealthy and powerful, and Bach tells him what he heard, says he's going to go to Europe to see if he can find out more about this organization. That night, Gunnar and Casey have dinner again, and he says that he wants to know everything about what's going on. She brings him to a fancy building, which is apparently their headquarters. They take him into an office lobby where Malmstrom is left alone for a few moments and is given the opportunity to listen in to the IMF stage conversation about him, indicating that he knows too much now and he can't be allowed to leave. Malmstrom takes that as his cue to exit quietly as Barney says he's alerting the guards. He maneuvers carefully through some passages and staircases, stumbling on a conference room where Willie is reporting on worldwide operations to an audience from apparently all over the globe. The reports indicate that the organization is making massive money from war profiteering, and Barney as Howards enters the room, telling the room that Malmstrom is here as their guest and prisoner. Meanwhile, General Weston and Leader arrive at Weston's home for a big meeting, commenting that in 19 minutes, Nightfall will come. Bach joins them, telling them that he lied about going to Europe, which allowed Malmstrom to head directly towards the IMF's not-so-secret lair. Leader says that Malmstrom needs to be liquidated since he's been compromised. Malmstrom is put in a lie detection chair and questioned by Barney and Willie. Casey comes in and says that Gunnar shouldn't have run, he was worried about nothing. Barney as Howards doesn't make such big decisions as whether to kill him, only the chief can do that. Gunnar demands to be released, but Barney refuses, saying he knows too much about their plans, and he says they know about Nightfall, worrying Malmstrom. Casey tells Gunnar that they want to pool resources with Pendulum, asking questions in a specific way that allows Jim to see that Nightfall is related to something to do with the military. They continue to press Malmstrom to see how he reacts to certain words. They definitely see that the plan is something to do with assassination related to military intelligence, and narrow it down to General Weston, who is setting up a time bomb with Leader. Bach heads to the IMF's building as Malmstrom is taken to see the chief, Jim, of course. They discuss the nature of power and that Pendulum's activities are causing trouble for their organization, which is called World Resources Limited or something like that, because their covert operations are coming under scrutiny, especially the amateurish plan called Nightfall involving military intelligence and General Weston. Malmstrom is shocked that Jim knows those details, as it's supposed to be a closely guarded secret within Pendulum's ruling council. But Jim counters that Leader is clearly incompetent, and he's not wanted by them. They want Malmstrom running Pendulum for them, with all the power that comes with that. All he has to do is get Nightfall called off. Maelstrom says that nightfall is already in progress and can't be stopped. And anyway, he's not convinced that Jim could protect him even if he were to agree to his plan. Jim gets guards to take Maelstrom away to sweat him, tells Casey to start phase 2 of their plan. An IMF operative puts on a Bach mask and gets instructions from Barney. And Casey asks Gunner to reconsider his choice, as Pendulum obviously knows where he is and is likely already planning to kill him. She attaches a pin to his coat. Jim, as State Department man Grayson, heads to General Weston's home and tells him that he seems to be in danger from whatever Pendulum is planning. Leader, as the general's assistant, Captain Adams, suggests that Jim stay for the meeting, and Jim sends a signal to Barney and Casey. Willie releases Maelstrom from his restraints and takes him down to the parking lot as Barney and Casey head away in a van. IMF Bach waits for Maelstrom to come down and stage a rescue, but Pendulum Bach finds his way into the building and pistol whips him. Other military officials arrive at the Weston home as Willie, Gunner, and a guard come down to the parking lot, finally, and Bach starts shooting at them. One of the guards is killed for real, alerting Willie that it's the real Bach shooting him. Maelstrom knocks out the driver and speeds away in the car, with Barney and Casey following him to the Weston home. The butler alerts the general, who tells Maelstrom to wait. Weston arms a bomb as he and Leader head out of the room and take Maelstrom to another room. And he tells them what he's found out, with the IMF listening in through the bug that Casey planted on him, alerting them that Weston is not who he appears to be. He recommends calling off Nightfall until they have more information, but Leader says the bomb is already set and figures that Maelstrom has betrayed them, or else he wouldn't want to call off the plan, and shoots him as he tries to leave. Barney alerts Jim, who throws the briefcase out the window with a few seconds left to spare. Maelstrom is taken away in an ambulance, with Jim giving him a meaningful look before he goes. Mission accomplished. I'm going to give this episode a grade of a C-. I know that might be a little bit surprising to a lot of people, but stay with me here. I really want to like this episode. It does have some good things going for it. This was actually the last episode that was filmed for the season. Obviously, it's not the last one aired. There are 2 that come after it. But as a note, this was it. This was the last time this group was together. The IMF building, as I read online, is actually a library at the University of California, San Diego. This is 50 years ago. I'm not sure if that building still exists. But according to some notes, I found that that's a building that was used, at least for the exterior shots. Interestingly, I also noted that we have some of the older school music that we had in season 1 through 3, at key points of the episode, which was, I don't know why, kind of interesting. The basics of what the episodes are generally about, that I generally sometimes kind of gloss over, I'll just mention them. The teamwork is good. Visually, this episode is quite well done. I think as a screenplay and the production, I liked it. I thought it was well put together. The good. I liked that this mission is agent level stuff. I wouldn't say that it has a super high degree of difficulty, but I would say that it at least is an appropriate mission for the IMF to tackle, because it's something to do with national security, and they're dealing with an organization that obviously has resources that need, a high-level team to take care of this potential threat. I also liked Dean Stockwell as Gunner Maelstrom. As an actor, Dean Stockwell, very, very prolific actor. He does a good job as Maelstrom here, I think. I'll talk more about the character Maelstrom. I've had to do that a lot, for season 6 and 7, having to separate the actor from the character. But I definitely do like Dean Stockwell, and I think he was good here. I liked the sequence in the parking lot with the 2 Bachs coming together. We have IMF Bach, the guy wearing a mask, and Pendulum Bach, the actual real Bach. That was really, really well done, where they kind of come together and the one Bach knocks the other one out after they kind of see each other. That really looked great, and I thought that was really, really well done and well staged. I mentioned that this one has a really, really interesting premise. The IMF going after this kind of what appears to be, whether it's kind of a domestic organization or more of a global organization, an organization that definitely has a lot in the way of resources and capabilities that are kind of on par with what the IMF has. A common problem that I've mentioned many, many times, and it does kind of come into play here, is that the IMF seems to have access to unlimited resources. At least here, the antagonists at first blush are kind of on equal footing. It's not unreasonable for the IMF to bring so much to bear on this particular mission. It is a little bit over the top that the IMF can apparently lease and, more importantly, set up a building. I know, obviously, they're government funded and taxpayer paid and all of that kind of stuff, but still, just logistically, to do what the IMF needs to do in terms of setting up a building like that, a building that could easily pass as, Apple headquarters, maybe not today, but from 10 years ago, and it seems like they did it in a matter of hours or maybe a day. With the whole conference room and all of these people who are dressed like they're from all over the world and this kind of thing. That was really, really way over the top. So it's kind of weird. I don't know if it's necessarily bad, but it's just something that, it strains credulity a little bit, to say the least. Moving on to things that are not good. And these are kind of counterpoints to some of the things that I've said. The big problem here, obviously, maybe it's not so obvious to everybody, but it stuck out really like a sore thumb to me this time watching it. The problem is that this one is the presentation of it, even though the premise is quite good. The presentation of it contains so much in the way of all I can call is cartoonish super villainy on the part of Pendulum. We're talking about an organization that seems to be this kind of, cabal of, well-off people who, instead of just making money through, legitimate businesses, as some of them seem to be doing, and just being content with that, are, doing these, going into things like war profiteering and things like that, and domestic or maybe even global terrorism. Again, there's just so many shades of that cartoonish supervillainy here, and the IMF counters with so much of their own. And part of it is the really strained dialogue that they have, and just the way that things kind of come together in terms of certain places in the plot. Like, for example, Casey and Maelstrom are having dinner towards the beginning of the episode, and Willie just shows up. Right? They're having a private conversation, and Willie is like, Andrea, I can't believe you said that to him. Like you're listening to us? Like, what's going on? And that really is the kind of thing that is cartoonish, almost comic book like. There's that vibe all over the place. Also, when the fake General Weston and Leader are doing their plotting, again, almost like a Disney or a Marvel villain. They're telling us all about their plan, and there's all this exposition about, Operation Nightfall, it's going to happen now. Let's set this bomb. Oh yes, that's a really good idea. Let's set this bomb for 3 minutes so we can carry out our plan. That sort of thing. The only thing that was really missing that would have sealed the deal with that, and I'm really glad they didn't do this, because then it just would have been just a complete farce. Would have been, but I was just thinking, can you imagine if they had Austin Powers evil laughter, like with Dr. Evil and his henchmen, that would have just been, it would have been completely a par for the course in it. I am glad that the producers decided not to go down that road, but that's what I was hearing. That's the only thing that's missing from the presentation of these Pendulum guys, is that evil laughter. So that's that's the thing that I'm sure, even if, I couldn't kind of put it into words until I really kind of thought about it just now, but you can feel it. And that's why you look at it, and a lot of people look at this episode. I'm sure a lot of the fans, or a lot of you who are going to be watching this review are going to be saying, oh my God, this is just stupid in terms of its presentation. I'm not going to disagree. I will just say, different strokes for different folks. There are a lot of fans out there, and whatever you love, that's great. There are a lot of people who like episodes from the beginning of the series. A Spool There Was, for example, is kind of a cult favorite for many, many fans. The Short Tail Spy, people consider that to be a really, really good episode because of certain aspects of it. I don't find those aspects particularly great myself, and you can go back and look at my reviews for those. But I think there should be kind of a general consensus in this particular case that, oh my gosh, the vibe I'm getting from this is not what fits this show. My feeling is I feel the same way about this as I do about those episodes. But as I said, different strokes for different folks. Whatever you enjoy it, please. We all look at things differently, and that's what's great about being part of a collective fandom, in my opinion. Other things that are not good. Gunnar Malmstrom, the character, is lame. I wouldn't necessarily say that he's a schmuck, because he does get played pretty effectively, I feel, by the IMF. And he's put in a position that he can't get out of. He's playing a very, very high-stakes game, and, the IMF basically kind of go all in and say, come on, now we brought you to a point where there's no turning back. They maneuver him into a position where no matter what he does, he's really, really messed up, because it would be impossible to convince anyone that he hasn't kind of turned sides by visiting their headquarters. Another problem with the Malmstrom character is because, and again, Dean Stockwell, I say pulls this off really, really well. I'm sure that he was directed to play Malmstrom in the way that comes across as very, very arrogant and proud and self-assured and intelligent. Normally, that would take a character, a villain, an antagonist, out of the unengaging category, which is generally one of the kisses of death. And I'm a little bit torn about that. I'm not saying that the Gunnar Malmstrom character is completely unengaging, but I don't think my feeling is that it doesn't give us the right kind of engagement. I think that part of the reason that Malmstrom is not as engaging as he probably should be is because, strictly speaking, he's not the big bad. He's not really the target of this mission. The target of the mission is the Pendulum organization. And that's always tough. The Mission Impossible formula is generally to go after one person or two people sometimes, a small group of people, but to go after kind of a nebulous organization of people, who are mostly unknown to the group, that's more difficult to pull off. And I think that that's something that works against the Gunnar Malmstrom character in terms of really getting the audience involved in this episode, because there's not as much of an opportunity to get that engagement going with the character. It may seem that at times that despite his arrogance and despite his self-assuredness, that he's almost overmatched, and he's in a position where, now the playing field is kind of tilted against him. And that might be one of the reasons that I don't find him to register in the engaging aspect of villains on Mission Impossible in the usual way. I think I've already kind of alluded to this, but just to make it clear, another thing that is not good here, there's not a lot of new ground covered, I feel, in terms of the techniques that the IMF uses. We've seen it all before. And there's a lot of, I've already mentioned about the painful and strained dialogue. Another good example of that strained dialogue is when there's that conversation between Jim and Malmstrom in the office, where Malmstrom meets the chief. They talk about, the nature of power. Join us, and we can, we'll do this world domination thing together. And we want you. And talk about the leader and all of that. That I was kind of rolling my eyes a little bit of that. It's like, come on, you guys, you're obviously trying to fill a few minutes that you wouldn't be able to fill otherwise. That was really plotty and bad dialogue, and it's all over the episode, but that's probably the most glaring example of it, in my opinion. Plenty to go around there. So I like the premise. I like some of the aspects of it. I think C- is where it can settle. I consider it, just from kind of a plot and a story standpoint, better than a lot of the season 7 episodes, which I think it just rises just above the level of the D or the D+. Not by much. It's in the lower part of that C-, but I'm comfortable with that grade. 2 more left to go. And then I have to make a decision about whether I want to roll to the revival series, or whether I want to take a little bit of a break and maybe do a little bit of review and go back and some other things. I'd love to get some feedback. I think I'll post something about that on the Facebook group and see what others will think. Thank you guys, as always, for watching this video. Please like this episode video review. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and please leave your comments about this and other episodes. I'm looking forward to them. Thank you again, and I'll see you next time.